Welcome back. So I've gone ahead and I've deleted quite a bit of CSS and HTML code, and what we're going to be focusing on in this tutorial is font families. Okay, so font families work in different ways. So there are general kinds of font families, and is a specific font. So for example, Courier is a specific font, Verdana is a specific font, but they kind of have a family on which they fall into. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at a serif font. Okay. Now you'll notice that the serif font, if I zoom in here, has these little lines attached to it. Okay. So these little lines are what makes a serif font a serif font. Now the reasoning behind this is that the serif fonts, those little lines kind of trigger your brain to make it easier to read. So, you can kind of see at the bottom here that these little kind of appendages at the end of the letters, they kind of form a line at the bottom. So you often see books with these serif font. So if I zoom out, for instance, and I go and we can compare it to the sans serif font, you see that there are no appendages. So the sans serif font is a little bit more modern looking. More people tend to use it on the web, and they look better for titles. But there's nothing wrong with serif fonts. People still use them all the time. So, for instance, okay, so we have a serif, and we can add in the font family. We can either add in the specific font, or we can just add in the font here. So we can go to sans serif. Okay, and you can see that it changes. Sans meaning without in French, of course. So for those of you who speak French, some people pronounce it sans serif. I'm pretty sure that's incorrect. It's sans, like in French, without. So the next thing is there is another type called cursive. Okay, and look at that. That looks completely different, and you can see that it is more of a cursive style. Okay, cursive as in cursive handwriting, of course. And we can add in another one called monospace. And monospace is really cool. Now, if you look at this area here, the I, the N, and the T all have different widths. So if I zoom in, and you take a look at this here, we have the T that has a specific width. The N, being a larger character, has a greater width. The I is smaller, so it also has a different width, and the M is capital M being bigger, has a different width. But in monospace, every single character, no matter which size, has the same width. Hence monospace. Mono meaning one, space meaning space. So monospace fonts are all the same, and for the longest time, computers only could deal with monospace. So if you're going for a retro feel, you want to use monospace. And lastly, we have fantasy. Is this the real life or not? So we have the fantasy, which is a little bit different, and these ones are more for kind of fun fonts. Mostly use serif and sans serif fonts. Occasionally use monospace fonts. But in addition to that, we can go and we can add in a specific font, like Impact. That's a neat font here. We can add in Verdana, which is one of my favorite fonts. We can use something like Georgia. That's a different font here. It's different from your regular font here. So you're more than welcome to try out as many different fonts as you can. Now, fonts are super important, and you're thinking, if you want to be a web developer, you need to know what fonts look good where. And in order to do that, you need to play around with fonts as much as possible. And when you go to a website, you need to deconstruct what font they're using. So if you look at the top of JS Bin here, I'm pretty sure this font is Arial. We can always Arial like that here. And I'm pretty sure it's Arial like that there. If not, it's something very similar. But you notice there is no serif fonts here. In fact, I don't think there's a serif font anywhere on the screen, if you look at that here. So just keep that in mind. So you always want to look at what fonts look good where. Let's take a look at some more CSS in the next tutorial.